Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Truckers Podcast, FYI, Conversations Without Barriers. I'm your host, Doug, from Ontario, Canada. So recently, the press secretary of the Trump's administration just claimed that Canada has allowed the United States to become a fentanyl dumping ground, claimed that enough fentanyl to kill millions of Americans got into the United States last year from Canada. We know that for a fact that this is not the case, and that less than 1% was seized at the American border last year. It didn't get into the United States. And this claim has stirred up some strong reactions. And President Trump recently discussed fentanyl smuggling with the Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau during a 50-minute phone call. Trump reportedly expressed dissatisfaction with Canada's efforts to curb the fentanyl trafficking, stating they were not good enough. And Trudeau, on the other hand, has maintained that less than 1% of fentanyl entering the United States came through Canada. It seems the number cited by the press secretary might not have a clear or a reliable source, and we know Donald Trump is not a reliable source. And for an example, President Trump himself has been known to drastically inflate figures related to fentanyl deaths, claiming numbers far higher than official statistics. When you question his campaign representatives, they often avoid providing specific sources, instead pointing to the general concerns about the opioid crisis. These figures are being used more as a rhetoric tool than as a reflection of the verified data. This is dangerous when disinformation is spread. Like this is when figures are exaggerated or lack proper sources. That can distort public understanding and fuel unnecessary fear or tensions. And this kind of rhetoric has the potential to escalate misunderstandings between nations or communities, and particularly when tackling sensitive issues like the opioid crisis, which already carries significant challenges. And this dangerous rhetoric has unfortunately been a recurring theme in the recent events, for instance, during the 2024 U.S. Presidential campaign rhetoric from Donald Trump for its potential to incite violence. And Trump faces criticism for promoting unverified claims about Haitian immigrants, which reportedly led to bomb threats and intimidation in a small Ohio city. His speeches have been analyzed for a sharp increase in violent language over the years, with phrases like bloodbath. For the country raising concerns, these examples highlights how charged language can escalate tensions and even lead to real world consequences. Now, just recently, the big three automobile manufacturers got a 30-day reprieve on the tariffs for General Motors and Stellantis. Was intended to give them time to adjust their strategies and potentially shift production back to the United States. And however, the administration's broader goal of revitalizing domestic manufacturing have faced skepticism, and the industry leaders have warned that such policies could increase production costs and lead to higher vehicle prices, which may not necessarily work. The industry leaders have warned that such policies could increase production costs and lead to higher vehicle prices, which may not necessarily be a good idea for automakers to relocate. So the reprieve might be more of a temporary relief than a long-term solution. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, the big three automakers have a lot of pull to persuade the Trump administration to back off these tariffs. Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis have significant influence, and they have already used it to secure a 1-month exemption from Trump's administration tariffs on Canada. This reprieve came after direct discussions between the automakers and the administrations, highlighting their ability to negotiate favorable terms when their operations are at stake. However, this exemption is temporary, and the administration has made it clear that the ultimate goal is to encourage these companies to shift production back to the United States. And it's a high-stakes game to leverage with both sides trying to protect their interests, and we're not going anywhere. Secondly, the cost of building new plants, and third, they have a pact with Canada. And relocating production is no small feat. The cost of building new plants, reestablishing supply chains, and training workers is astronomical. It's not something the big three would take lightly, especially when the current arrangements are like their well-established partnerships with Canada already serve them well. And Canada has a key part of the North American auto industry for decades. And the USMCA, United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, solidified trade relations in the region. And this agreement provides a framework that automakers rely on to keep costs down in production and have production efficiency. Given all this, it's unlikely that the short-term tariff threats alone would sway these companies to move its complex balancing act. Donald Trump needs to remove the tariffs. Removing the tariffs will help foster smoother trade relationships and reduce the cost for automakers and consumers alike. And tariffs often create friction by increasing prices and disrupting established supply chains, which have an unintended consequences for industries heavily reliant on cross-border operations like the auto sector. Instead of pressuring the companies to relocate, governments might focus on incentives for innovation, workplace training, and sustainable practices to strengthen domestic manufacturing. Let's talk about misinformation and disinformation. I've talked about this before. And what is misinformation? And it refers to faulty or inaccurate information that is spread without the intent to deceive. And for an example, if someone unknowingly shares an incorrect statistic or outdated news article, they're spreading misinformation. While the unintentional, it can still cause harm by misleading others or perpetuating falsehood. And this information, on the other hand, is deliberate. False information shared with the intent to deceive or manipulate, in this case with the press secretary of the United States, falsely claiming the amount of fentanyl entering the United States. That is disinformation when the stats are out there and that less than 1%. Disinformation to influence public opinion and policy, and the consequences. Misinformation can erode trust over time, especially when repeated unchecked. It may lead to poor decisions making or unnecessary panic, even if there's no malicious intent. This information can be far more dangerous because it often aims to sell division, destabilize societies, or manipulate groups. It can erode democratic processes, exaggerate conflicts, and contribute to real-world harm such as violence and discrimination. And addressing these issues require critical thinking, verifying sources, and fostering media literacy. Canada's not going to stand for this. Recently, with the ongoing trade war with Canada and the United States. The Ontario Premier Doug Ford said he and the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau are on the same page with a position that Canada will not be compromising on tariffs. Now, the U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Limpdick has raised the possibility of a tariff give and take scenario. Ford suggested Canada will not be removing any of its retaliatory tariffs unless the American tariffs are removed. Zero tariffs. And the attack was not started by our country. It was started by Limp Dick Trump. He decided to declare an economic war against the country and our provinces, and we're not going to back down. Premier Doug Ford already said that's right from Ontario's premier to cut off the electricity with a smile on his face. Now, I don't know if we should feel sorry for the press secretary. Is she really that incompetent? She just goes on to, with what Trump says. Is she just a puppet on a string? Trump just makes her look like an idiot. Makes her look like she doesn't know what she's talking about. And it's very clear she doesn't know what she's talking about. But Trump is her boss. And she's got to do what Trump tells her to do. And that's really unfortunate in this situation. With this recent pause on the auto sector, what does it mean? Maybe Trump is ready to negotiate markets, renegotiate the tariffs. And so with the recent pause on the auto sector, tariffs announced by Trump administration has sparked speculation about potential negotiations. This 30-day reprieve was reportedly requested by the major automakers like Ford, GM, and Stellantis, who argue that the tariffs would disrupt their supply chains and increase production costs. While this move could indicate a willingness to negotiate, Trump has historically used tariffs as a bargaining tool, often applying pressure before making concessions. He puts the cart before the horse. We saw the markets crash the other day. With significant losses, with concerns about the broader economic impact of these tariffs. And this uncertainty has left investors uneasy, as the potential for a prolonged trade conflict looms. Trump doesn't have a strategy. He doesn't understand the auto sector, nor does he understand the political landscape of Canada. It's true that navigating the auto industry in Canada's political landscape requires a nuanced understanding of both economic and diplomatic factors. The auto sector is deeply integrated across the United States and Canada, with supply chains that rely on seamless trade. And the disruptions like tariffs can have ripple effects on both economies. And understanding this complexity is crucial for effective policy making. In Canada's political landscape, with its emphasis on federal-provincial dynamics, its unique relationship with the United States adds another layer of complexity. and missteps in this area constrain relationships and impact negotiations, like wanting to annex Canada, make it become the 51st state, insulting the Prime Minister. No one understands Trump's endgame. The way forward is to end the tariffs. If Trump wants to renegotiate the CUSMA, then go back to the table. And remember, this trade deal, Trump said it was the best deal when he was first president. Now he's not happy about it. Whining like a little baby. Trump once hailed the CUSMA deal as a major victory, branding it as a significant improvement to the NAFTA. Now, his dissatisfaction and the push for tariffs seems contradictory to his earlier claims. The tariffs are causing economic strain on both sides of the border. And you feel those strains effective immediately. And renegotiating the CUSMA would require a delicate balance to avoid further disruptions. Ending the tariffs and returning to the negotiating table could indeed be a more constructive approach, and it would allow for addressing any genuine concerns while maintaining the stability of trade relations. The unpredictability of Trump's strategy, however, makes it challenging to foresee whether this path will be taken. Now, should Canada take a more assertive stance in response to these tariffs, or focus on diplomacy? Well, Canada can take a more assertive stance. Remember, we only released the first round of retaliation tariffs, with more to come. Canada has already shown its willingness to push back with those initial retaliation tariffs, holding more in reserve. And it gives Canada leverage, signaling that it won't back down without any meaningful concessions. This assertive stance could pressure the United States to reconsider its approach, especially if the economic impact starts to hit home. And at the same time, balancing assertiveness with diplomacy is key. Too much escalation could risk further strain on the relationship, but a well-calibrated response might just nudge things toward a resolution. It's a tightrope walk for sure. Should Canada focus on targeting Pacific industries with the next round of tariffs? Canada is going to do exactly that. Targeted tariffs can be a powerful tool, especially if they hit industries or products that are politically sensitive and economically significant for the United States. And it sends a clear message that Canada is prepared to defend its interest while applying pressure where it's most likely to prompt a response. For an example, the past tariffs have strategically focused on U.S. industries like agriculture, where the economic impact can ripple through communities and amplify political consequences. This calculated approach shows Canada's intent to be firm but strategic. And like on the American alcohol, we're not purchasing it anymore. Shut down the online catalog, removed American alcohol from our store shelves. It's a complex situation, ladies and gentlemen. We'll see. We're trying to navigate Donald Trump's incompetency and his lack of understanding 101 economics. It's frustrating and it's challenging to deal with somebody like Trump who is mentally incompetent. We'll wait to see what happens. But thank you for joining me this morning. I'm your host, Doug from Ontario, Canada. This is the Truckers Podcast, FYI, Conversations Without Barriers. Thank you and take care.